How divided are we in Michigan? A new documentary takes a hard look at where we stand. Also, Nolan goes one-on-one with former Senator Carl Levin about politics in D.C. A bad interview by Education Secretary Betsy DeVos puts Michigan schools in the spotlight, and keeping track of who is taking water out of the Great Lakes. Stay right there. MiWeek is coming up.
I have a question. Who wants to go first? To win? Who wants to grow our business? Who wants to make more money? Who wants more job opportunities? If you want Michigan to compete and become a top 10 state, raise your hand. Together, we've turned Michigan around and started moving forward. Now help us build a stronger Michigan than ever. Raise your hand at strongermichigan.com.
Masco Corporation is proud to manufacture innovative and environmentally friendly products for the home. Delta faucets, craft-made in Merillat cabinets, and Behr brand paints have all been designed with you in mind. Masco and its family of companies, serving Michigan communities since 1929. Funding for this program is provided by Delta Airlines. Keep climbing.
Hi there, welcome to MiWeek. I'm Christy McDonald. We are starting with the concept of Michigan divided. Over the last year, the Center for Michigan and Bridge Magazine followed the lives of a group of voters from across the state and got a sense of why they held certain beliefs. And they ended up with a documentary that really gives you an idea of how culturally divided we are and starts conversations of what policies and issues really matter and if we can ever bridge that divide. And that will be a key in a big election year. Nolan Finley is off, but with me at the table is Stephen Henderson of WDET Radio. And joining both of us is John Bebo. He is the CEO of the Center for Michigan, and Ron French, senior writer for Bridge Magazine, who also wrote and produced this documentary, Michigan Divided. Ron, hey, welcome to MiWeek. It's good to see you.
It's a pleasure to finally
John, welcome back.
It's a pleasure to carry Ron's bag today.
That's right. All right, so I love that starting off this discussion of the concept of Michigan divided, and whereas Center for Michigan, you've done so many community conversations over the year, you have Bridge Magazine. Why delve into the documentary territory? And I'm going to start with you on this, John.
Well, after a decade of community meetings and bringing people together to talk about issues, 2017 did not feel to us like a year where we could bring people together in community meetings and get much more than shouting. So we took a completely different tact, and we did some polling, we did some focus groups, and that informed our sense of how divided the state is now. So we decided, let's just go out and ask a lot of questions and embed with just a few families and try to get a deeper understanding of the divide that way before we go about trying to somehow solve it.
Right. So is this a process of how long, Ron, and how much time did you spend with each? Was it 6 families?
It was 6 families. It started as a project in Bridge Magazine where we followed 11 families. And it took us about 2 weeks to realize, there's more here than what we can just do in Bridge. Let's try to put together a documentary. So we followed 6 families from around the state, from the UP all the way to Grand Rapids and Flint, and with very different points of view, and just tried to get a sense of what their lives were like, because we tried to pick people who, in this environment today, people often stereotype and have views of what their lives are like and why they think the way they do. We wanted to sort of get into their lives and see if there's really common ground there.
It kind of think assumptions is what gets us into trouble in the first place, Stephen.
Yeah, no, that's right. I mean, we don't know each other very well in this state if you go too far outside of the city or the county that you live in. And it's also true that our politics and our politicians, I think, have taken some pride, I want to say, in heightening those divisions, right? If you're representing people from Ishpeming, you're looking at Detroit and saying, the reason your life is not good up here is because of what happens down there, and they're taking your money, or they're taking from you. I'm going to borrow a phrase from someone pretty close to me. When the gruel is thin, the knives are sharp. Yeah. And the gruel's been thin here in Michigan for a while, and the knives are sharper than they maybe have ever been.
John, was it surprising to you some of the response that you were able to see? Now, you released this documentary yesterday. for the first time on Wednesday. What was some of the response to it?
We released it at one of a series of policy conferences the center is hosting around the state this spring. And I would describe the audience as thoughtful and pensive. They had listened to 3 big policy discussions all morning, and then we gave them a movie to watch, and people didn't move. They just sat there and watched and just kind of took it in, and then we had some discussion afterwards, and I mean that was the first audience, so it's a small sample. But what we're hoping to do is to prompt people thinking about, okay, what happens after the shouting? We're all mad at each other. Maybe we don't all understand each other very well. At the end of the day, we got a lot of kids to educate. We got an economy to run. We've got roads we have to fix. What do we do when we're done shouting?
That's an interesting concept. All right, so let's go ahead and take a look at some of the people that you followed in Michigan Divided.
What do politicians not understand about you?
Oh.
What it's truly like living up here.
Yeah.
How hard it is, and it's not by choice.
I think they need to live in our shoes once.
Yep. Get rid of their
literally.
credit cards, drive our old unreliable beater car everywhere.
Yep.
Try to feed your children on $730 a month. Good luck.
Yeah.
It doesn't matter if you're old, young, or rich, poor. Just what about just treating a person like a human being? Why does it have to be a Democrat versus Republican? It's almost like a gang. You know what I mean? Like we're the Crips and we're the Bloods, or we're the Hells Angels and we're the something else. I don't know.
We're the Reds and we're the Blues.
Right, the Reds and Blues. It's like they're gangs, and they forget that people are affected by this turf war. Why can't they just fix it? I don't understand.
I'm afraid for my kids. I'm afraid for them growing up and being in fear. I'm afraid for my daughter, afraid to wear the hijab.
Nobody should be afraid to live in their own country. We were born and raised there.
As a small business owner, I feel like I've had a target on my back. They're looking at guys like me. How can we get more money out of them? And I see it on the local level. You know, it just happens in the state and Fed. I've always told people, if the liberals would be for smaller government, balanced budgets, keeping us economically strong and militarily strong, I would be a liberal.
Yeah, I think it's really interesting because I feel that the theme here is people are saying, you don't understand me and you will never understand me. How can we start to, I guess, bridge that divide, Ron? Or is that the kind of feeling that you got from interviewing these people in this documentary?
Well, first, they're all fascinating people.
Yeah.
Really good people, completely different points of view politically, but they're all really good people. But what I found fascinating is when we spoke to these 6 people, you know, many times in their homes and in their work, is that how similar these people were. You know, they all want better roads. They all want clean water. They all are very frustrated with our politicians. They agree on 95% of things, yet that other 5% is keeping them from talking to each other, and so it's hard for anyone in the state to actually solve anything.
So where do you go then from here, Stephen? When you see that divide, say we agree on actually so much, but yet feels like we're so much further apart than we ever have been before.
Well, I mean, some of it again has to reflect back on the leadership on both sides. I mean, they have stoked this difference up into a huge conflagration in a way that it never really was before and doesn't deserve to be. I mean, as you point out, people have more in common than they have differences. But as long as people are going to the ballot box each year and thinking, what's in this for me, and how can I make sure that the other people out there don't take more of what I have, you have no shot at electing people who will bring us together. You have no shot at policy that will fix the problems that we all have in common. And right now, the political class in Michigan benefits from that. And I think if you look at it, it's more on one side than the other. I do feel like the Republican Party has made more of that than the Democrats have, but there are certainly people on the left side of the ledger who are guilty of the same thing. But as long as that's the case, it's really hard to talk about what a solution would look like. Roads is a great example. We every year deal with the consequences of our poor decisions, policy decisions in terms of roads. But when it comes time to talk about real solutions, everyone says, well, I don't want to pay more than you pay, or you're not paying enough, I pay too much. It becomes a zero-sum game really quickly.
So I think it's really interesting, and John, and the work what the center does is you're able to kind of gather the thought of what everyone is talking about and then hand deliver it to the policymakers, to our politicians, and say, hey, look, this is what people are thinking and this is what they want to see. Do you find them receptive to what what people are saying?
I think 2016, and this isn't a pro-Republican or pro-Democrat statement, I think 2016 really changed that dynamic of being able to talk to political leaders. I think it created a much wider fissure among policymakers, and it's why we've changed our approach of what we're doing to engage the public. Because the old approach, and we had some successes back in the day of going out there town hall style, shining community meeting on the Hill and going to leaders and solving problems. We were able to do some of that, but that is not the climate we're in today. We find ourselves at the Center and Bridge in 2018 feeling like we're simply in a situation where we have to determine, protect, and amplify fact. I mean, if we can't agree on a common set of facts of what's really going on in our state, then we can't hope to solve some of the problems. So we've gone from everybody solve problems and take it to the leaders and see if you can get something done to, at this point, let's just protect fact and let's engage people in the question of why are we shouting all the time?
Is that disappointing to you?
Yeah, it's immensely challenging to, no one should feel sorry for us, but it's immensely challenging to do the kind of work we set out to do today. I mean, at Bridge, what we're trying to do with our nonprofit journalism is drive home big picture stories and issues driven by the best facts you can find and the best data. And what we saw in 2016 was an exacerbation of a longstanding problem. It's not just politicians that the public doesn't trust, it's the media. And that is a more severe problem than we think it's ever been. So we're kind of going off the rails and trying some very different things this year. We've bought a mobile citizenship van. We're just going to go to 100 communities and just listen. I think part of the problem that the media faces, and we saw this in the 2016 presidential election, is this idea of if you go into communities, you're just helicoptering, and you're not going to very many communities. There wasn't a lot of attention to the sense of rage in Michigan and Wisconsin and places. Not enough anyway, by some of the candidates, and also not enough reporting that really got to the depth of that, which is what we're trying to answer with some of the work we're talking about today.
And you bring up the media and kind of how I think a lot of media outlets are starting to, they have to think about how they're operating in 2018 and especially going into an election year. You talk about it in Michigan Divided. Let's go ahead and take a look at what people had to say.
Today, I don't think people spend time nurturing any sort of relationship. It's more, you're wrong, and I don't have to listen to you anymore. I'm going to unfriend you.
People can't sit through a 2-minute video anymore. They can't barely sit through 30 seconds. So how do you really give somebody the facts and get them to be knowledgeable on something if we're only listening to these sound bites all the time and then making an opinion?
Is it just the media or?
I think it's a general digital divide, that it's not the media.
I think it's all driven by the media. And I wouldn't necessarily say fake media, because I don't even know what that means. But I have to tell you, the media is, honest to God, if what went on 20 years ago, I mean, it would be blasphemy. I mean, I think they're totally irresponsible. Totally, totally.
All right, so obviously it's interesting. How do you get beyond those sound bites or get people to immerse beyond the sound bites, Stephen?
Well, I mean, I think it was interesting, the last speaker there talking about media and how it's all our fault and that we're doing things and saying things that we didn't do 20 years. I think there's a lot of truth to that. The proliferation of media and the outlets that exist now that didn't then, I think, have changed not just the rules, but the game itself, right? It looks really different. But I also, I would also have been interested in hearing her talk about the difference between media outlets and social media. I think social media is...
But I think that's the problem, though. The line is totally blurred because people are getting their news from Facebook, and that is, you can say, there's the social media outlet.
And that's not a media outlet, right? Facebook is a media platform. There's all kinds of different data and information flowing across it. People use it irresponsibly, and that's part of what the problem is with the divide now. But that's not CNN or the New York Times or the Detroit television stations or newspapers doing that. That's the people who are Facebook. The other thing I think is really important is the listening that you guys were talking about, and media sort of pivoting to spaces where all they're doing is listening, right? Usually we listen as one step in a process to create a story or a documentary or things like that. But where do we, or how do we sort of create spaces where we're just listening and we get people to listen to one another? And that's the end game. I think there's new pressure on media outlets to think about that in some new ways.
Unfortunately, I think listening is a lost art. People are just waiting to get their point in when someone else is done, and we've talked about this a little bit. Ron, I'm really I'm surprised that people trusted you guys enough to bring them into their homes and say, we're going to talk to you and we're going to put you in a documentary about this. When you talked about the media, did they wag a finger at you a little bit, or what was the reaction there?
Yeah, I'm a little surprised they trusted us too. But yeah, some of the families were like that, and one of the women that we just saw here, who talked about blaming the media, she was very hesitant to talk to us, and she felt that that we were going to portray conservatives in a negative light. Mm-hmm. And a lot of that has to do with how the media is broken down now, because everyone has their own media they can go to that matches their preconceived perceptions of reality, and social media obviously makes it worse.
All right. Well, you know what? We've run out of time in this discussion. I do want to say, though, John, next week that we're going to be part of a summit, and a lot of the conversations that you're going to be having around the state. We're taking a look at education next week in Detroit.
Yes, we are, and we're very glad to partner with DPTV in that effort. We in the media, we can wring our hands all day. At the end of the day, you have to do something. So we're trying to adopt to some of the new tricks today, and the conferences we're doing are broadcast. They're on Facebook. We're trying to be in the same spaces as some of the new tough climate.
And we'll look forward to that. Ron French, John Bebo, thanks so much for joining me. I appreciate it. Turning now to a conversation between Nolan Finley and former U.S. Senator Carl Levin. He was the longest-serving senator in Michigan history, and since he's retired, Senator Levin is still pretty busy. He was just appointed mediator in the Flint water contamination class action lawsuit. He has some pretty strong words about the state of politics in D.C.
There was an era when consensus building was common, and now we are in almost straight partisan votes on so many issues. Is it possible today, in today's environment, is it possible for consensus to happen?
Consensus probably no, but in terms of a greater ability of some kind of a sufficient number of people to come together so that they can pass things, it may be a majority or a supermajority. It may not be a consensus, but I understand your points. One of the things that happened was that there were more and more people that were elected to the Congress who said that we didn't come here to compromise. And if you're not there to compromise, you're not there to govern, because governing requires a lot of times that there be compromise. There's sometimes you're not going to compromise. It may be a principle so deep that you're absolutely going to say no. But the idea that we would shut down the government, for instance, there's almost no principle that I can imagine that would drive me to say, I'm going to vote against the entire government functioning because I didn't get what I wanted, or there's something in there that I don't like. And so a group came, sometimes called Tea Party group, frankly, that said, hey, no, there's too damn much compromise. I don't, that's the swamp. That's the way you guys get things done, and we don't like the way you get things done. That group gained stronger and stronger clout, mainly within the Republican Party. And that kind of drove the moderates in the Republican Party out, frankly. A lot of Republicans, who are moderate Republicans so-called, couldn't even run for re-election. Olympia Snow from Maine, a senator from Indiana, couldn't even run and win a primary against somebody who took the position, it's all a swamp, drain the swamp.
But aren't we seeing the same thing happen now among Democrats? Yeah. You saw in California, the California Democrats wouldn't endorse longtime Senator Dianne Feinstein because they perceived her as being too moderate. Are moderates being driven out of the Senate on by both parties?
Well, there's some significant differences. There are some similarities, by the way. I think there's there's a test of purity that is applied on the Democratic side by some too, which I think also is a mistake. It's not the same, quite to the same degree, the same depth as it was with the so-called Tea Party folks or the Freedom Caucus. It's not that. It's not. I don't think most of those folks in California who have someone other than Feinstein they're supporting would vote to close the entire government. So there's different levels of the extreme.
Finally tonight, sometimes we take for granted the amazing natural resource known as the Great Lakes. We get our water from there. It's used for industry, for recreation, but it's also in high demand. Who gets to use the water from the Great Lakes? Who decides? And how much should it cost? Here at Detroit Public TV, our Great Lakes Bureau has a new documentary coming out on March 26. It's called Tapping the Great Lakes.
Fresh, clean water. Is there any resource on Earth more important for human life?
Fresh, potable water is the most valuable commodity in the world. It's more valuable than gold, it's more valuable than oil, it's more valuable than diamonds. Civilizations have risen and fallen based on their access to it.
We have 20% of the fresh water drinking supply in the entire world. The Great Lakes are looked at very enviously by many.
And with access to that incredible volume of fresh water comes the responsibility of not just stewardship, but protection from perceived threats, both from outside and inside the Great Lakes Basin.
I would be concerned about anything that diverted fresh water from the Great Lakes and depleted our resources in any way.
The bottled water industry in the state of Michigan accounts for a fraction of percent of the water use in the state. So collectively, all the water bottlers account for 0.01% of all the water use in the state.
The streams are drying up. When you go to the headwaters, have these so-called monitors there, they claim the water is running at some ridiculous amount, 200 gallons per minute, and what we find is a puddle with stagnant water in it.
When you look at this as a whole and look at what's happening as a result of the overuse of the aquifer, we came to the conclusion that the Great Lakes was the only reasonable water supply for the residents of the city of Waukesha.
Our utility manager went before our Common Council and told everybody that our deep aquifer is declining 5 to 9 feet per year, and it wasn't. Waukesha has known all along that our deep aquifer is increasing, not declining.
And that's going to do it for MiWeek. We'll be on the road in Detroit next week talking all about the state of education in Michigan. Hope that you'll join us for that. Until then, find us on Twitter and Facebook and, of course, at MiWeek.org. I'm Christy McDonald. We'll see you next time. Take care.
I have a question. Who wants to go first to win? Who wants to grow our business? Who wants to make more money? Who wants more job opportunities? If you want Michigan to compete and become a top 10 state, raise your hand. Together, we've turned Michigan around and started moving forward. Now help us build a stronger Michigan than ever. Raise your hand at strongermichigan.com.
Masco Corporation is proud to manufacture innovative and environmentally friendly products for the home. Delta faucets, craft-made in Merillat cabinets, and Behr brand paints have all been designed with you in mind. Masco and its family of companies, serving Michigan communities since 1929. Funding for this program is provided by Delta Airlines. Keep climbing.